Hello everyone, my name is Josh and welcome to Whims, and today I'm going to give you my review for the second episode of Season 7, Bete Noire, and this particular episode focuses on a woman by the name of Maria. She's essentially a food technician, sort of advisory technician at a sort of fast food, or not fast food, but sort of like a food packaging or food producing company, and it's called Dita. And if you know what the name of the episode or the name of that particular fast food place sounds familiar, it's because it was referenced in the previous episode, Common People, when Amanda does her Honey Nug advertisement at school. She essentially says the words Honey Nug by Dita, so I thought that was actually very interesting that there was sort of almost like a bleed through almost between it was almost like in Loch Henry and Joan is Awful, where they reference the sort of streaming platform Streambury. It's actually really nice when they have those little connective little references that connect the two episodes to each other. But this episode focuses on Marie, and she's a fast food sort of like a food processing technician, and she has a good life. She has a good life with her boyfriend. She kind of likes to have fun. Her boyfriend previously worked at a restaurant called Barney's or Bernie's, and she basically got into food via a nut allergy, and of course that comes up in again later. But she essentially tries out food concepts, and she makes them, or she has them made, so that they can be tested by focus group and all these other things. So she has a very good life. She has a high-ranking job in this sort of like big company set up, but she's not completely higher up to the point where she has a say at everything, so that's very important. But one day when she's in one of these food testing scenarios, she encounters a old face from the past by the name of Verity Greene. And Verity Greene, she has sort of catalogued as a bit of a strange one. She is a character who by and large is just someone who was a bit of a computer genius, and she kind of was on her own. She kept to herself throughout secondary school, high school. And when that happens, it kind of turns this very kind of interesting character into something even more. But what I really like about this setup is, at first you think it's going to be kind of like, oh, it's sort of like Charlie Brooker doing sort of like a throwback to the 90s, you know, like sort of like the 1980s or the 1990s, with films like, you know, Basic Instinct or Single White Female, or you know, Fatal Attraction. You think it's going to be like a callback to those sort of like 90s or early 80s, you know, stalker thriller things. But then as the episode goes on, you realise that there's something about Verity that seems to be a bit off, because when she asks to prepare a certain food for a particular taste test, where one of the recipients is Hindu, he doesn't eat meat, you kind of have this very icky feeling when you find out that, oh yeah, the food that was tasted for this particular product was in fact beef, and of course because he's Hindu he doesn't eat beef. So when it actually turns out that the preparation part of it happened, she says, we need Carrageenan, we need Carrageenan seaweed, or a type of seaweed. It's called Carrageenan. And she goes, how do you spell that? And she tries to spell it, but then she just kind of goes, I'll just send you an email. And when she sends her the email, it all goes badly, because it turns out that particular food had beef in it. And in Verity's list, it didn't say beef, it said no. It said, you know, Carrageenan, but then they say, oh, you didn't say Carrageenan, you said non-pork. So she goes, okay, let's check the email. Let's check up on the email. Let's see how it happens. But then it turns out that, oh no, she's in fact written non-pork. So she's immediately in the firing line. And she gets very angry at this. But then her boss just says, just apologise to Verity. And she says, I'm sorry. But she doesn't say with much conviction. And then later on, she has a moment where she sort of, you know, is sort of like getting angry at her boyfriend, as she starts to, you know, burst out at him. But then when the very next day they try to patch things up, and she talks about, you know, how in high school she had a relationship with a teacher where he was very nice to her and very much, you know, treating her very normally and treating her like an actual person. Verity just confesses that, oh yes, he was a nice person, but when he left, I felt like I had no one, and everything sort of changed from there. And you think it's them sort of mending the bridge, but then I had to set this up earlier. But throughout the episode, there is a recurring gag where this woman has her almond milk keep getting drunk, and this other guy in the office keeps getting blamed for it. So throughout the episode that keeps happening, and you're wondering who's drinking the almond milk if this person clearly has like their name labelled on it. But then it turns out that it was Verity who's been drinking the almond milk, and she actually does. We know this because she actually does so right in front of Maria, and she just sort of drops it, and Maria's just shocked and thinking to herself, "Why would you do this?" And of course, when she actually gets called out on this, she says, "Let's check the CCTV." And it turns out that she's actually being seen drinking the almond milk in front of Verity. And you're wondering, why is this happening? Why is reality being shifted? And it's all because of a necklace that she has where she's able to alter reality to her advantage. She has all these different realities, and she's essentially picking the reality where all this horrible stuff is happening to her, and only she is the one who knows what's going on. So it's basically a sort of technologically based version of a type of manipulation called gaslighting, in which basically the whole entire idea behind it is you're essentially being manipulated to a degree where you start to question your own sense of reality and your own sanity, basically. And it came from the 1944 film of the same name, in which a man is manipulating his wife into thinking that she's going mad, effectively. It's actually a really good film. If you haven't seen it, it's actually a really good 1940s sort of thriller. But yeah, it's very Hitchcock inspired. But what's very interesting is that entire film has basically created an entire form of language. The form of gaslighting is sort of like entered language as a form of manipulation and, testing one's sanity almost. So I actually really do like this episode. And I like the fact that Verity is one of those characters who just really immediately, almost right out of the gate, she just gives off this aura to Maria that there's something just off about her. Even though technically she doesn't really do anything to her in the very beginning, you do get this impression that she just has something off about her. But part of me just feels like, and this might be a very controversial opinion, Maria is a terrible person. I'm generally just going to say that right out of the gate. Like, yes, she might not have any malicious intent towards Verity at the beginning, but the fact that when she's talking about her past with Verity, she describes Verity as just being a bit weird, even though she's a computer geek. Like, yes, she's a computer geek, but that doesn't necessarily mean she's weird. It just means she's really into computers. So immediately she judges Verity right off the bat, which really kind of made me angry. And then, second of all, she kind of blames a friend of hers who she contacts at the midpoint in the episode, called Natalie Kane, who supposedly, back when they were teenagers, started a rumour that she had had an affair with Mr. Kendrick, when in reality the whole entire relationship was completely platonic, kind of like I suppose Barry Fairbrother and Crystal Wheaton in the J.K. Rowling novel The Casual Vacancy, where it was entirely platonic. There was no relationship angle to it whatsoever. It was more the fact that he was sort of like a symbol of hope and rekindling this element of hope and self-respect in Crystal, whereas in the case of Mr. Kendrick and Verity, it was probably like, oh yeah, he probably told her to keep applying yourself to this computer stuff. You can do great things. You're going to be famous one day. You're going to be the next female, probably Bill Gates or whatever. So it kind of has that feel to it, where he kind of rekindled this sort of element of, oh, you can do things. You can apply yourself, even though people might think you're weird in the beginning. You could do great things with this. And it's actually really lovely when that happens, but when someone starts a rumour that, oh yes, there might have been, a very inappropriate relationship going on, and it's just not true, it's really horrible to have that happen to you. So even though Maria did do this horrible thing, she never actually gets called up for it. She never actually gets called up for doing this really horrible thing and kind of manipulating it as if, because what she basically does is when she contacts Natalie, she essentially writes the email and says, have you had any contact with this Verity Greene person? But she doesn't reply, and hours later she basically replies, oh yes, Natalie sadly passed away a few days ago, and she'd actually taken her own life. So it really kind of makes you think, with what's going on with the necklace and everything, it kind of makes you think, did Verity actually make Natalie commit suicide and kill herself effectively? Did she actually push her to do it, or was it something that she just did naturally through guilt? And it's one of those things that really kind of makes you think, and that's why I really like from a storytelling perspective, but I kind of found it really annoying that Maria was the person who could have started it off, and I found myself kind of going, and she even admits at the end of the episode that yes, I started the rumour, but part of me feels like she doesn't do it as if, oh, she's sorry. She does it as if she's kind of like, because she doesn't learn anything throughout the course of the episode, and there's this big confrontation at the end of the episode where she basically manipulates reality to really kind of piss off Maria, but then she gets it kind of gets pushed to a scenario where she's almost threatened to be arrested, but then she takes one of the cops' guns almost casually and shoots Verity in the face, and then she grabs the pendant, pushes Verity's thumb against it and says it works for me, and then immediately she's in control of every reality. And what's very interesting about this scenario is she doesn't just say, oh, you didn't arrest me, you got called to a false address, who is this person who's just been shot, and all the rest of it. She could have just said, oh, it was somebody else, it was an intruder who got away, and I was just a friend who was there, who was visiting. She could have just said all that stuff and then just gotten away with it and just kind of left the house and everything would have been fine. But she says, no, you're not just, you're not just police officers who came onto this scene, you work for me. And they say, all right, boss. And then immediately she goes, you worship me. And then they bow to her. And I thought, what a narcissist. What a narcissistic way to do things. Like, yes, we all have power fantasies where men worship us. Like, I'm guilty of this more than anybody. But part of me just feels like that's not something that a person would do to get off of a murder charge. And I found myself going, yeah, I didn't like Maria in this episode. Yes, we are meant to sort of sympathise with her as this horrible stuff happens. Like, as she's sort of like manipulating the cameras to make it look as though she's drinking the almond milk. And then there's the scenario where she basically goes, how can I drink almond milk? I have a nut allergy. And then she goes, there's no such thing as a nut allergy. And then everyone's like going, nut allergy? What's nut allergy? Is it a new phrase that the kids are using kind of thing? And she goes, I have a nut allergy. And he's going, nut allergy, or saying this word as if it means something. And I love that entire moment. Like, that moment actually made me laugh the most. Like, I was just thinking to myself, oh my god, she's manipulating reality to the point where she's actually made it as though, nut allergy is a thing that doesn't exist. And I love the entire, even though I laughed the first time I saw this part where she just basically calls him to see you next Tuesday, I loved that moment when I first watched it, but I found myself going, yeah, Maria is kind of a terrible person, because yes, even though she's completely justified in acting out the way she does in this episode, I found myself going, please, for the love of God, actually have a moment where she actually learns something, because honestly, this character doesn't learn a thing throughout the course of the episode. Like, she sort of starts off as a very entitled, very kind of up-and-coming executive, like, food tester person, but then she sort of remains that throughout the episode. There's nothing that really kind of makes her go, okay, I learned something through this. Like, yes, you don't have to be, like Cartman or Kenny or Stan in South Park, like going, I learned something today kind of thing. But it kind of, you don't have to do that. But I found myself going, Maria doesn't learn a thing throughout the course of the episode. Like, yes, she does have her life almost ruined by Verity, but it's not as if she gets fired from her job. She gets given a sabbatical by her boss to, get your head together, get some professional help. And I'm asking you as a friend to another, a fellow human being, all this stuff. Like, yeah, he's basically saying you get to have a little bit of a work sabbatical to get your head together, get your mental health in check, and then you can come back when you're ready. Like, you're still going to have your job, you're still going to have your position, it's just going to be, different for a little while. And then she just says, F off, you see you next Tuesday, or F off, you C word. And I just thought, that's kind of how a toxic person would react when things don't go their way. That they go from, instead of going from 0 and it just slowly escalates to about 11, they go from 0 to 11 in a flash. And it's like, that's how she is in this entire episode. And I couldn't help but think, even though she's completely justified to do the things that she's doing to really kind of keep her reputation together, I couldn't help but think to myself that Maria is still a horrible person throughout all the things that she's done throughout the course of this episode. Yes, a lot of it's focused on the backstory of what she did to Verity, but part of me just feels like it goes beyond that, because she doesn't acknowledge that what she did was wrong. She kind of thinks to herself, she even says to her during the almond milk scenario, Like, she says, I was never mean to you, Verity, but I do really wish we could have been friends and things like that. And you can tell she was just being very fake, that she was just doing it to kind of, make herself, feel better. And I found myself going, this character is not a nice person. Like, even when her boyfriend is, like, pulling her up on it, she kind of just goes, he goes, oh, well, okay then, if you expect people to suck your dick, then... And she goes, I expect people to suck my dick. And it's like she has that sort of reaction that a lot of toxic people would have. Like, if you confronted a toxic person on this sort of behaviour, they would go from 0 to 11 in, like, a flash. And it's really kind of horrible, because it's like, she immediately goes, oh, that's virtually impossible since I don't have a dick, but then you wouldn't know anything about that, would you, to her boyfriend? And I thought, okay, you're demasculating your boyfriend as well. That's really mature. And then, because there was a lot of things that just really pissed me off about this character, that yes, she goes through something really horrible, which I wouldn't wish on my own worst enemy, but part of me feels like she doesn't learn anything through the experience. She doesn't think to herself, like, maybe I was that exact same person in high school, maybe I still was that exact same person in this sort of, like, food processing company that I'm part of. And it really just kind of made me think she didn't deserve the ending that she got, is what I'm trying to say, basically. But I really just think this episode was good. I really liked the performances. I especially liked the performances of the two leads. They did a very good job. And the actress who played Maria, even though I am kind of, shitting on Maria a little bit as a character, I do feel like the actress who played her did a very good job of making her this person. But I'm glad that she gave dimensions to her, because it would have been very easy as just to depict her as the villain or just as the victim. I like the fact that they gave her dimensions. They didn't just say, okay, let's just make her a complete and total bitch, or let's just make her a complete and total, victim, where she's just completely nice to everybody. I'm glad they gave her dimensions where you didn't quite know what to make of her. But I really do like the actress who played Verity. She did such a good job in this episode of just kind of playing this character who is deliberately trying to ruin her life, but at the same time, the repercussions and the fallout of what actually happened to her with the almond milk scenario and actually trying to attack Verity wasn't as bad as it could have been. Like, she could have very easily lost her job. She could have just said, okay, you're fired. That's it. It just basically gave us a sabbatical and said, you need to have time to get your mental health together, but your job's still here when you get back. So it wasn't as bad as it could have been, but I found myself going, even then she kind of looks at it and goes, okay, that's it. Like, it could have been much worse. And I just really could have found Maria to be a really horrible person, and that's kind of how I felt about this entire episode. Good episode, but the main character was a total unlikable douchebag, and that kind of made me angry about the whole episode. But I found that the episode was still good. It still said some interesting things about, how people can be manipulated into sort of like seeing the truth certain way, or how you feel that certain things are against you. But I wish the character was more relatable. I wish the character was more of a, character who we see like go up the ladder as we go along, so it felt even more relatable when things started to crumble. I really do wish we saw sort of like Maria at a very lower stage in her life, or in sort of this company, and we sort of like had a quick montage of her going up the ranks to sort of like this food processing thing, and she sort of gets interested in food, and we could have had this big montage of the whole thing. But then as the episode goes on, we realise that, oh yeah, she has a bit of a dark past. Honestly, if this was edited down a little bit, this could have been a movie. This could have been a Black Mirror movie if you did it very well. There's something in here that could have been expanded upon, or you could have done like another interactive Bandersnatch movie. There's so much potential with this particular storyline, and you could have done so many interesting things with it, but instead it's just like another episode. And I feel like, even though that's fine, the episode is still good on its own. It has some very interesting things to say about technology. It's not technology motivated this time round, but again, a lot of the best Black Mirror episodes I feel are not entirely focused on the technology. Yes, the technology is there, but the real thing that really hooks us in is the human stories. Like, one of the things that we really love about episodes like Black White Bear is the scenario that it's basically about a woman who's being on trial for this murder of this child and all the rest of it, so that when you see her go through this suffering, you really start to question, like, is this idealised justice? Like, yes, she did this horrible thing to this but did she deserve this much, punishment? And granted, she doesn't do anything that terrible, but she just watches. So she just watched this child suffer. Just, she deserved to have the exact same amount of pain and suffering that was inflicted on her. for this particular crime. You're constantly weighing up the options there when you watch this episode, and even I'm back and forth on does she deserve the torture and suffering that she gets, or is this a little bit overkill? And it's kind of the same thing with this, where you do kind of I'm up and down on the character of Marie, because I feel like it is justified that she is sort of this very headstrong person, but there was even another scenario that really could have pissed me off, where she could have just had this moment with her boss where she just sort of walks up to her and she says, "Oh, I've hired, Verity, and it's great." And she seems like overly qualified almost to be in this position, but it's great, like we have a new member of the team. And she goes, "Really? Well, you should probably just halted the brakes a little bit." And she kind of I've always had this very kind of folding arms attitude, and I thought, love, you're not a member of the board, calm down. Like, this isn't your... Like, yes, she should have a say who gets hired on her team, but the fact that, she immediately could have treated it as though it's kind of like her... It's almost like she was like the extra member of the company almost, and it really kind of made me feel like, okay, calm down, love, you're not a member of the board, or how do you get the right to feel this entitled kind of thing. And it really just kind of made me angry. Like, yes, it really kind of made me feel frustrated, because yes, the character is almost, going through this horrible thing, but I didn't find her completely 100% the victim. I found her to be, complete. But that kind of just goes to show how good Charlie Brooker is at this, because he managed to give her more dimensions than what would have otherwise been given to a character like this. But I just wish the character had more of a... I wish the character felt more like Regina George in Mean Girls, where she actually did go through a bit of a character growth moment. Like, yes, she didn't completely change as a person, but she still, it still felt like Regina George learned something or grew through the experience of what happened to her in that film, where, yes, she gets run over by a bus and she has to wear a brace on her back, but part of me just felt like she was the mean girl and she was mean to everybody and treated everybody badly. But at least you felt like in that film, you could have felt like she at least grew from the experience and became somewhat of a better person, if not completely a better person. But you felt like she grew, whereas Maria doesn't grow in this episode. She doesn't grow as a person. She doesn't develop any kind of catharsis. But that's kind of almost what Charlie Brooker has a license to do. I think Charlie Brooker likes to make episodes where horrible people can just be very frustratingly horrible. And I especially like the line during the confrontation scene where she just says to Verity, "I've got your fucking thing." Just the way she says the line, like when she's holding it like this and she's like going, "I've got your fucking thing." The way she says it, like, I've seen this episode twice. I watched it twice by myself, and I usually like to watch React channels. One of my favourite React channels is The Real Rejects, and they do like reactions to Black Mirror episodes. And when I actually heard the line, she goes, "I've got your fucking thing," I laughed there as well. It was one of those things where that line will always tickle me, kind of thing. That the way she just says it, like, "I got your fucking thing," it just really kind of... It made me go, like, you could have just said pendant or something like that, but yeah, she just goes, "I got your fucking thing," and it just kind of made me laugh. But yeah, I liked this episode. Maria was a bit of a toxic person, but that's kind of goes to show how good the writing is this time round. Like, the fact that she got more dimensions than what would otherwise be. But I just felt like Maria didn't deserve the happy ending almost that she got. And I really kind of felt like it just really kind of felt like I wish there was more of a torture... Not a torture aspect, but I wish there was more of a sense of... I wish it was almost like, give this character a break almost. But she doesn't have that moment. She doesn't have that give us an effing break moment. Like, it's not like Alex DeLarge in A Clockwork Orange, where horrible things start happening to him, and you're just kind of thinking to himself, he gets kicked out of his house, he gets thrown onto the street, he gets beaten up by homeless people, he gets, harassed by the cops who turn out to be some of his old friends, he gets, manipulated and, tortured by his old, victims, and it's like, give this guy a break. Like, yes, a lot of people can say, oh, there's also catharsis for what he did, but the fact that your inhumanity comes out and goes, oh, just give this guy a break. Like, yes, he did horrible things, but does he deserve this much torture? Does he deserve this much agony and pain? And a lot of people might say, yes, he does, after all the things that he did, but I felt like, at least I felt bad for when this stuff happened, whereas when Verity, when this happened to Maria, I found myself, there's not a moment in the episode where I found myself going, she needs to have a moment where she's like, oh, I'm a really terrible person, I need to have a little bit of a reflection moment. there was never a moment like that in this episode. It was all like, oh, it was pretty gung-ho. And I wish Charlie Brooker gave more, dimension. He did give dimension to her as a character, but I felt like I wish she had a moment where she was like, oh, I'm actually a really terrible person. I'm sorry I did this to you. Or I actually, wish she had a moment where she was like, oh, I knew this was a bad thing. But she doesn't. Throughout the entire episode, like when she's talking about Natalie Kane and them starting this rumour, she talks about it. She uses Natalie as a scapegoat, first of all. And she says things like, oh, she started this rumour and I just went along with it. Even if you wanted to portray yourself as sort of like holier than thou person, you could have just said, oh, I tried to stop it. But she doesn't. And I just wish she had a moment where it was like, okay, I just wish she could have acknowledged she was a terrible person. But she doesn't. Like when I sort of think about it, she is the real villain of this story. Like, she is the person who didn't get any comeuppance. She didn't get any kind of, moment where she was looking in the mirror. And I think people say you getting a sabbatical on your job is sort of like worse enough. No, getting a sabbatical on your job isn't worse enough. Like, she doesn't get fired, first of all. She should have gotten fired for what she did. But part of me just feels like she deserved a lot worse. And I think just getting a sabbatical from your job and just kind of, getting obsessively, fixated on this person who didn't do anything to you in high school is just kind of like the bare bones of how much she should suffer. But I really didn't like this character, and I think her not getting her not getting her comeuppance was one of the things that kind of frustrated me on my repeat watch, because she's a horrible person, but I don't know, I might be in the wrong this time round. But I really do like the way the character was written. I like the fact that Charlie Brooker at least gave a little bit of dimension to her. She wasn't completely saintly, but then she wasn't completely, a bad person either. She could have, it was just perfect in between, but I felt like her toxic behaviour throughout the episode was kind of a little bit too much, and I found myself going, I wish more horrible stuff happened to her. I know it sounds cruel, but I wish more horrible stuff happened to her, like she lost her job, or she lost her boyfriend, or something like that. But all of that happens kind of off screen, and it's just kind of, or it doesn't happen off screen, it doesn't really happen at all, really. You don't really see how the boyfriend reacts. It's just kind of like, oh, he walks off, and then the very next scene you could always imagine they're okay again, almost. So yeah, it's a good episode. It was funny. It had great performances by the two leads. And if they aren't in anything else, I really do hope they go and get more work after this, because they are really good, especially the actress who played Maria. Even though I've shat on her character a ton of times, I felt like she did a very good job. And I felt like the actress who played Verity did a good job, because she was a complete bitch. Like, yes, she might seem justified in the things that she does. I felt like the way her character was handled in this episode was very well done, because you really do feel like she gets a little bit more dimension when she gets, revealed to be, when she reveals what she's trying to do. And I really did feel like the performances were very well done. I just wish with the alternate versions of this episode as well, like the different labels on hats and things like that, I wish Charlie Brooker could have done more with this idea. Let's do like another interactive special, or like another movie or whatever. Like, he could have done so many interesting things with this, but then it's just another episode. It just kind of feels like there's so much potential that could have been done here. So it's a bit of a divisive review. I did like the episode overall. I just wished that Maria's character was kind of, treated a little bit more like, she had a little bit more of a growth to go through. But other than that, I really enjoyed this episode. It was very funny. There were a lot of great one-liners. I especially like the I expect people to suck my dick scenario. Like that kind of scenario just really made me laugh. And I just, even though, yes, it is kind of a very toxic response to a question, I found myself kind of going, yeah, this is a really funny line. But then I just found myself going, this episode is really good. It's got great performances and everything like that. But I could be wrong. Like, this could be one of those scenarios where I leave it to you guys in the comments, because I want you guys to tell me, what did you think of this episode? Did you like it? Did you not like it? And if you're planning on starting the series, I would recommend going back to the very beginning with this particular show, because yes, it is an anthology series. The whole entire point of anthology series is you can, jump in at any time. But I would recommend going back to the beginning. But what did you guys think of this episode? Did you enjoy it? Did you not enjoy it? What did you like about it? What did you not like about it? Did you think Maria was completely justified in being as bitchy and, toxic as she was? Or did you find, Verity's scenario justified, or did you think she was bordering on cruel? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And if you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you like this video, please be sure to subscribe for more videos. And I hope you're having a very good day. This has been Joshua Wims. And my next review for Black Mirror will be on the episode Hotel Reverie. And get the tissues ready. It's going to be a long one. And until then, please subscribe. So yeah, this has been Joshua with Interesting Musings. Take care, bye bye for now.